Hi everyone. Today, let's talk Boeing. Boeing has been going through some pretty rough times if you've been paying attention to the news lately. But the problems didn't really start with the 737. The 787, their previous program, was $32 billion over budget. And why was that? Let's take a deeper look into Boeing. As always, there will be some jelly at the end, which is something I enjoyed outside of the markets. If you have big dreams like buying the new Nissan GT-R 50, go ahead and like and subscribe. It marks the car's 50th anniversary. Only 50 of them will be made. It features an all-carbon fiber design, and it is expected to go on sale for $1.1 million. Keep your dreams at the front of your mind. Like and subscribe. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So first up, let's talk about the 737. The first crash was by Lion Airlines in Indonesia, and it killed 157 people. So why exactly did this happen? This was about 1 year after the aircraft was launched, and Boeing put an electronic system into the plane without telling the pilots. Therefore, they weren't trained on it, and they were not told about it. So they did not understand how to override the system. And because of this, it crashed the plane. And then it crashed another plane a few months later, causing the entire 737 fleet to be grounded, pending further investigation and corrections. So what does this all mean for Boeing? Well, it means a $19 billion loss and their first losing year in 2 decades. And currently, all of the 737s are still grounded, and we don't even know really when those airlines are going to come back online. This article goes on. Not only did they lose $19 billion, but they had to set aside another $9.2 billion in order to cover potential losses in the future. The current forecast for total losses is at $21.7 billion. The bottom line here is this is a very significant loss for any size of company. Boeing is a century-old company. They've been making aircraft for many different purposes for decades, but losing $21 billion over a single issue for any company can be devastating. And not only are they losing that amount of money, but it's stopping their income. So they have a lot of actual cost as well as opportunity cost. The 737 MAX was their best-selling aircraft, and only the future will tell if it continues to sell or they're going to be in a much more difficult position into the future. And just to reiterate, they did go $32 billion over budget on the 787, which was the project immediately prior. This currently is a profitable aircraft, and they have produced over 900 of them, but it becomes a pattern when you're $32 billion over on aircraft design, and then the very next aircraft that you design has multiple crashes. 1 is an incident, and 2 becomes a pattern. So the question is, what direction is Boeing going to go from here? Another pretty major point of criticism has been Boeing stock buybacks. Since 2013, they've spent $43 billion on share buybacks. And had they used that money to reinvest in the business or perhaps on design of the 737 MAX, instead of trying to cut costs and do what they did with the program, perhaps they wouldn't be in this situation. So the first thing that they did do was hire a new CEO, and his focus is on transparency. He told board members that his focus is on integrity and transparency, and he wants to strengthen the culture of Boeing and make them more focused on their heritage that made them such a great company. He was embarrassed by employees saying that the 737 MAX was designed by clowns, and I feel like that had an impact on him. This is just theory at this point, but I feel that he is taking some of the correct steps in moving the company back towards what made them so great and one of the safest aircraft manufacturers in the world. All right, let's get to the Morningstar report. So last price on May 14th was $122.52. Morningstar still predicts their fair value to be $281, which means they are currently at 44% of fair value. Trailing dividend, 6.71%. However, they have suspended their dividend, so they will not be paying a dividend until they redeclare a dividend. And that could be several years from now. So at this point, investing in Boeing is not a dividend investment. Industry, aerospace, and defense, and stewardship has been standard. I would argue in the last few years, their stewardship has been poor. Let's see if they have anything further to say about that. Their current business strategy is a wide-body aircraft, which is the 787, and a narrow-body aircraft, which is the 737 MAX. However, the 737 MAX also takes up a larger percentage of the market share. It's not cut half and half. The smaller aircraft are a much larger percentage since they're used by much more regional airliners. It goes on here to say that they think the 737 MAX could be operational again by second or third quarter of 2020. Second quarter is over halfway done. I would say third quarter is kind of hopeful. It has been grounded for over a year at this point, but I would say maybe the end of third quarter, beginning of fourth quarter is the soonest that we could say that the 737 MAX is airworthy. Goes on to say that the 777X does currently have a backlog. They currently have several hundred orders for the 777, but they have reduced their production due to the Rona. However, the 787 is still pretty dominant in the long-haul lineup. It also says here that 35% of Boeing's business comes from the defense industry, and that broadly, defense spending as a percentage of GDP remains constant or above market growth. It says Boeing has raised $25 billion in bonds that will mature in the next 3 to 40 years. This is allowing them to basically stay solvent during this situation, having that liquidity on hand to continue production with some of the backlog and figure out the 737 issue. They need that cash to continue to operate. It says they are still maintaining a 281 share fair value despite all of these difficulties. The reason that they're maintaining their 281 fair value is that they understand that Boeing will carry a heavier leveraged balance sheet going forward. However, the CEO has made it clear that once the MAX is recertified for flight, that they will focus on shrinking their balance sheet, which means they're going to pay back as much of that debt as they can in order to restabilize the business. Also, they need to start developing a response to the Airbus 220 and the Airbus 321neo XLR. If Airbus is not contested in these markets, we think it will take substantial share and that Boeing's position in the commercial aircraft manufacturing duopoly may be weakened for decades. So it's important that they maintain their innovation amidst all of this struggle. Let's talk moat briefly. It says here that Boeing has a wide moat, and this is because it takes significant effort for new companies or just starting companies to try to make an aircraft from scratch, essentially. Designing and meeting all of the specifications from the FAA and eventually selling the idea of that airplane and then physically manufacturing and shipping those aircraft to airliners is a massive underhauling for any company. And for this reason, Boeing and Airbus have had a duopoly on this industry for quite a while, despite efforts from China and Japan to start breaking into the commercial airliner industry. Let's talk a little bit of risk here. They're listing backlogs as a sign of future growth. However, backlogs represent risk because commercial airliners are highly cyclical, and any delays to these aircraft can potentially cost them millions of dollars. And if these airlines are losing millions of dollars, they're going to be less likely to go with Boeing, and they could potentially go with an Airbus equivalent. They also see supply chains as a risk for Boeing. Boeing does outsource a lot of parts for their aircraft, and due to the Rona, they're going to have a significant struggle getting some of those parts, especially from overseas and specifically in China. Next is stewardship. It says here they're giving Boeing a standard rating for stewardship. And this is from this point forward. So they're giving the new CEO the benefit of the doubt. They believe that he is going to bring a better culture to Boeing. And I tend to agree with this. He seems to be taking the right steps and putting safety first and kind of airing out Boeing's dirty laundry in order to regain some public faith in the company. And by doing so, it also creates a culture that is willing to bring up issues and solve them. If you have the CEO going out on national TV and telling the world about their problems, it seems to be less of a problem for interior workers to bring up those problems to their next level of management, which would make them a more problem-solving company, which is something that I would like to see as an investor. All right, let's talk financials and projections. Current projection is 233 by the end of 2021. This seems like a pretty bullish projection to me. They're currently up a little bit after this report, so I think the share price right now is 130 or 135. That would mean pretty substantial growth up to 233. I just don't see that being the case unless the 737 MAX is deemed airworthy a little sooner than I'm guessing. And if that happens and they can ramp up production of the 737 in order to start getting cash flows again, allowing them to ramp up production of their 777, if those all happen in succession without any hitches, I could see that fair value being reached by the end of 2021. If that is not the case, I think this is a little bit overstated. Moving on to financials, you can see that their net income has been positive until last year. As I mentioned before, this is the first time in more than 20 years that they have taken a loss. And currently, they are going to take a loss again this year, unless all of those things that I just mentioned happen. Current earnings per share is negative. And really, all of these negative numbers here is what's causing the share price to go down from 340 down to 130. But remember, less money is made when you buy things that are expensive than when you buy things that are cheap. Money is made when you buy into a little bit of fear, and that fear tends to be overstated. So if that fear is overstated and Boeing pulls out of this and reasserts itself into the airline industry, there is a significant amount of upside to this stock, in my opinion. However, Boeing does have significant hurdles which present significant risks overall. One thing I haven't talked about very much is the defense aspect of Boeing. They do hold a lot of defense contracts, and here's a few of them. Got the Navy P-8A aircraft, which is the Sub Hunter. And then here's a whole slew of different projects that they work on. Some A-10 replacement parts, Longbow Apache, Air Force One, some autonomous systems, the Apache training system, B-1 Lancer, B-52, Chinook helicopters, C-17 Global Master. I mean, the list goes on. EA-18 Growler, the FA-18 Super Hornet, the F-15EX, Advanced F-15, a couple of different missiles in here. I'm not going to read all of these to you, but there's a significant amount of defense contracts that Boeing has their hands in. So don't think that the airline industry is the only thing that keeps Boeing afloat. They do make a lot of other products for the US government as well as private airliners. So to summarize my position on Boeing, I am currently bullish. I'm not as bullish as the Morningstar report is. They do have a great moat, and it is very difficult to break into the airline industry. They do face some struggles with their 737 MAX as well as the 777X. Stiff competition from Airbus, and Airbus is continuing to innovate. However, if Boeing gets back to their roots with this new CEO and they get this 737 MAX back in the air and they innovate to compete with Airbus, I believe Boeing can retake the highs. But there are a lot of hurdles in there, and I think it's going to be a little bit longer until they reach their full potential from what the Morningstar report is saying. Full disclosure, I did buy some Boeing shares at a 130 cost basis. And of course, this is not financial advice. Make your own decisions and consult your own financial advisors before making any decisions with your own money. And with that, let's get to the jelly. So today's jelly, in honor of the Boeing-themed episode, is a flight demonstration from the F-22 Raptor. This is the current air superiority fighter for the United States. and it is incredibly agile and capable. And they did a demonstration at the Yuma Air Show in 2018. Here's a little bit of what that looked like. I have linked the full video in the description if you want to watch the rest of it. And with that, go ahead and like and subscribe so you catch all my future videos, and have a great day.